We are live.
Are we?
We are live, Don.
All right.
Just got off the phone with Jeremy Kelly.
That's a real thing.
A what? Oh,
Headphone head, because we're on and now we're back on. No,
yeah,
I don't think it's too bad.
No, you're good. So no, we are live here. It is Thursday morning, and we decided to kind of go live because again, the Bills face the weather, and our guy, the former director of football administration and who was in charge of travel, couldn't have a better guest than our own Don Purdy, who was in charge of travel for many years. So let's talk about today. It's a little different than, moving the game to Detroit. Right. It's still a little different than what they faced last week or clearing out the stadium. What do you think they had to do to move it, to basically move it up a day?
They had to cross their fingers, first of all, Josh, big time, because whatever hotel that in Chicago that they arranged for back in May, and it's not like they just picked up any hotel. Hey, they have free HBO. Let's stay here. They have to find a hotel that meets the requirements of having specs like meeting rooms, meal rooms, security. They could get all the players on 3 floors. So what they had to do was, when they made this decision or were thinking about making this decision, call the hotel and say, oh, by the way, can we come in the night before? So
they rent out 2 floors, 3 floors.
It depends. Preseason's always 3. They try to get them in 2 floors.
Okay.
Where all the players are on just 2 floors, and then you open up. You say it's floors 9 and 10, and when the elevator doors open on floors 9 and 10, as you recall, you traveled with the team. You'll see a table there with a security guard and a newspaper and a cup of coffee, and they was listening to a podcast like ours.
Yeah. It's funny. I was telling my buddies and Jody about that specific thing. And back when I traveled, we were all on 1 floor, and there were guards, you want to say, but security personnel sitting at the elevator. At first, I thought, oh, well, they're trying to keep people from sneaking out. What I came to realize is they were more trying to keep people from coming up to the floor. Yes. That was much more the challenge. The challenge was more so who might be coming up to visit the players or the coaches, rather than, guys aren't going to go out at 2 a.m. This was obviously before social media. I'm sure even more now. Right. You're not going to see some guys at a bar in Chicago tomorrow night. But there were a lot of people who were very interested to get to the floor that the players and the staff were on.
When you walked around the lobby, it wasn't like, I bet that's his sister.
Yeah. I heard many stories about people who would specifically hang around just in the hopes of meeting the guys and maybe, striking up a conversation or more. So it was definitely like you tried to move the bubble into, a road environment. So if they're leaving today, they're going to practice.
And they are leaving today, right?
Yeah, they're leaving today. And they're going to probably go right from practice. Maybe they go home, get their stuff. Who knows?
There is like an hour and a half, like 90 minutes between the time practice ends and they're supposed to be at the hang. So some guys might live close enough to be able to pop home. If they don't, they have to be prepared the night before with everything they need to know they're going directly from the stadium to the air.
So they always talk about like distractions and what it'll mean to lose a day of practice, and I feel like in this case you're probably going to lose maybe a walkthrough. Maybe they'll do a walkthrough in the hotel lobby tomorrow. They probably don't, with the weather the way it's going to be in Chicago. I wouldn't think that they'd go find a place to practice tomorrow.
Oh no.
You can do a mental walkthrough in the lobby. You've seen those films before where they'll tape off stuff in a ballroom.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're right. They'll if there's a room enough in the hotel, typically the ones that are chosen have such a room. They'll just kind of literally walk through, a play or two, especially if it's a trick play or something they haven't perfected. Whether it's a fake punt, and I'm not saying I know anything about plays that they have, or flea flicker, reverse. They'll practice just walking through that in the hotel itself, just to make sure they have everything down. I would think maybe the play that Dawson Knox pulled against the Jets, drawing them off sides. Real situational plays.
Yeah, they'll go through like the substitutions and all the the clock management stuff that you do on a Friday. A Friday practice. Well, no, this would actually be the equivalent of this practice. practice, the Saturday
Right.
morning walkthrough. And that Saturday morning walkthrough was typically real, I would say lackadaisical, that's the wrong word. But, they'd let family and friends sometimes be on the sideline.
Depends on the head coach.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
that.
some
Who
head coaches
didn't?
Who didn't? Who did was Dick Ron.
Wade did.
Wade did too. Okay. Greg Williams did. I think Shan Gailey did not.
How about your buddy?
No, I don't think.
Was it certain tie for the players during practice?
Not during practice,
Okay.
but heaven forbid they didn't have one. Yeah, for that look if they didn't for the trolling.
Yeah, I guess you're right. So that was kind of the more casual practice. It usually lasted like an hour, especially if you were leaving to go to the airport.
Right.
So it was about an hour, and it was all mental. There was no. I don't even think. Trying to remember when I was there, I don't even know if the guys. I think they wore their jerseys. It was just jersey shorts and and sneakers.
No pad, not even helmets.
No shells, no helmets.
No,
No, it was all substitutions, clock management, special situations.
Yeah, but if it didn't have value, they wouldn't be doing it. So they find value and they do it. So now they have to make another adjustment. It's crazy. It's crazy. And hey, they're still sitting there at 11-3 despite these challenges. And
yeah, this is the third significant, move,
disruption. Deviation.
And I think at some point, like I said, the cliche is always, it's a distraction. It's gonna, harm the team's preparation. I do think at some point there's almost like a rally around effect. And I looked back at this season a little bit, and you wonder if maybe the storm that was in November, which forced them to move the game to Detroit against the Browns, just lost 2 in a row. Like the thing, I wouldn't say things were going downhill, but they had that brutal loss to Minnesota. Yeah. So it almost like kind of cleared the slate, because you almost don't think of the season before. That game was such like an epic week.
You can't wallow in it. Right?
And it bonded the team.
Yeah.
And it bonded the staff. And you feel like the season kind of restarted right at that point. And they've won 5 in a row since.
Yeah, and for any outside noise that they would hear by turning the radio on or TV or social media, they had to concentrate on getting with the program and being part of and ready for any change that were going to happen with travel, and that probably helped given the timing.
Do you where did the team usually stay in Chicago? Like, do you have any good Chicago memories? Was it downtown Chicago? Because Soldier Field is like right downtown, and it is going to be cold.
Yeah. We stayed, I think in the preseason, we stayed downtown, but I recall for regular season games, we stayed just a bit outside of downtown. But yeah, the stadium's right down there, the Soldier Field, just far from it. So
it's gonna be interesting with a full day. So the staff tonight, the non-players, they can go out, have a drink, go to a restaurant, and it's a little bit more relaxed because the game is not tomorrow.
Exactly. They have to use discretion.
Of course.
I remember we played in San Diego one year. We went because it was 2 nights early. So we really had the whole next day.
That's a win.
It was nice.
That's a win.
So I just went out for a walk, and there was seals and.
Did you have all your Bills gear on?
I don't think so.
Did you ever wear Bills gear on the road when you were not like going to the stadium?
No, there was no reason to unnecessarily draw attention to yourself as part of, let's face it, the enemy.
The enemy. Yeah, that's true. So, Tim Langhans is on here with us, and he wrote, "This team been through a lot. What I worry about is not just left in the gas tank." I mean, that's a fair point. But I think maybe, and you can speak to this better than I can, I feel like a lot of the stress of all of this stuff isn't on the players. It's on you. It's on on you, literally. It was on your assistants. It was on the staff, the coaches even a little, but not really the players.
No, I mean, you mean for the deviations?
Yeah.
It was on the staff. They had to make it happen. You had to, no matter what, make the different travel day, the early travel day, seem like it was the regular travel day. I mean, your whole goal was to make sure that no one felt any differently. And
what's kind of different now than when I was there, or when you were director of football admin, because the Bills weren't good for a long time. Usually the routine was they played Sunday at 1:00, and now they're all over the place. They played on Thanksgiving. They're going to play Monday night. Like the typical schedule that seemed to be now Thursday night games, when I was there were no Thursday night games.
Mhm.
Like, I think the players now are a little bit more used to some deviation just in the general schedule
Yeah.
than they were back then, when 15 out of the 16 or 16 out of the 17 weeks you'd play Sunday either at 1 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and the Thursday night games, I mean, the team has done a job of winning those, and it's almost like having a mini bye. That's a time to, and I think the team right now, in regards to Tim's question, burnout, what's left in the tank, I think they're so focused on trying to get the number 1 seed, because if they can earn that bye, well, you talk about a time just to take that time and do the best that they can with it in terms of prepping and not having to do this again, not having to just turn around and play right away. They might, play on a Sunday evening and have to play a wild card game Saturday at noon. I mean, it's right there. There's a day and part of a day less.
You wonder what the motivation is going to be like for the Bears Saturday. It's going to be cold. They just lost a good game, difficult game to the Eagles, and you wonder, people are worried about, the cold for the Bills and distractions and all that. You wonder the motivation for the Bears when it's that cold.
Yeah,
and you're 3-11. And I mean, I know you want to put, your competitor, you're prideful,
any given Sunday,
all that. But I would more worry about the motivation level and the mental makeup of the Bears on Saturday than the Bills.
Yeah, there's not going to be much of a crowd behind them. I think I'm talking about one of the most miserable weather games you could draw up.
Yeah, the crowd noise obviously won't be a factor. Yeah, and what's funny what you said, and it ties back to our recurring theme of 1990. Mm-hmm. The 1990 team learned a lesson the hard way as well. In 88 and 89, they dropped some kind of inexplicable games, late on the road, that both years cost them the bye. In 88, they had to go to Cincinnati, which was a really difficult place to play for the AFC Championship. They lost this horrible game in Tampa. And Tampa was terrible.
It was a weird score, wasn't it?
12-5.
12-5.
12-5. And they lost that game, and that game cost them the AFC Championship game at home. Now, back then there were 2 byes. So both the Bengals and the Bills got a bye, but the Bills were the 2 seed, the Oilers at home. But they had to go to Cincinnati.
Right.
And then in 89, they had, bickering Bills, all that, and they dropped a couple of games. So they even had to go on the road for the first divisional playoff game against Cleveland.
Yeah.
So I can remember, and then obviously, during, our show and the research and talking guys, the whole goal of the 1990 season was to get home field advantage to the playoffs.
Yeah, they got it, and they did exactly what they should have done with it. And I think, not the players, obviously, given how many years have passed, probably don't have firsthand knowledge of that historical knowledge. If anyone's still there, we're trying to do our part here, is to show a pathway toward, look, Bills of 2022. When the 1990 team had their chance to get home field advantage in the bye, we're talking 51-3
even the championship. And even week before was the 44-34 game against the Dolphins, which very similarly to last weekend, the first half had no snow, and the second half of that game was snow. Mm-hmm. So just having the bye, obviously now there's only being 1 bye. But the whole point of this regular season all comes down to the next 3 games, because they're in the playoffs. You're going to have to beat a good team or 2. I think, frankly, you want to avoid the 2-3. If it's in Cincinnati, you'd really like to see them play each other in round 2.
An excellent point.
And you take your chances with whoever is on the other side of the bracket there, who comes out of there. So the number 1 seed, obviously, for the bye and for home field advantage, but then also the way the AFC is shaking up, if you can avoid those 2 until the AFC Championship game, well, then, I mean, you'll never get a better look. You'll never get a better look.
Yeah, it looks like a three-headed monster in the AFC with Chiefs, Bengals, and Bills. I still put the Bills at the top of that. Those 2 teams are tough to get past.
So let's dive a little bit more into the travel aspect today.
Okay.
So how did they change the plane?
The plane was tough too. I'm still trying to get Bill Harpole on the show. I know I'll be able to. He's a busy man this time of year, but the plane that was scheduled to come in would have been for tomorrow. They had to get in for today, and it is a charter.
Who pays for the plane?
Oh, the team pays for the plane. The team pays for the plane for the whole season that's contract.
Okay, so they see the schedule come out. You know the 10 travel dates.
Yep.
Is it a negotiated price?
Yep.
Does it depend on who you're playing that year?
It depends on how many miles covering.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to the West Coast times or something, that factors into it.
Do you have any idea like how much a charter plane is for 10 trips for a year? Like how much? Like when you were there?
Was there's about $1.5 million.
So about 150,000 per trip.
I mean, yeah, it's as a package deal, so I'm sure it's up over $2 million now. You know,
Okay, so it'd be $2 million all in for the team to travel from. So
guaranteed that the plane will be there waiting for you, both going there, going back. Food, a lot of food.
Okay.
Staffed with this, they want the same staff. They don't like a lot of turnover with the attendants, because they want attendants to kind of just feel comfortable, but not be weird, for lack of a better.
Yeah, no, there's a clear level for the guys. You don't. Yeah,
we had to let some go that just didn't.
The one big no-no is don't ask for an autograph.
Oh gosh,
and you'd see people who in the tunnel, or you could see maybe a conflict with the plane, or you want to keep that bubble again as tight as possible, especially when you have a good team with some high pro guys. You don't need Josh Allen on the plane being hounded for an autograph by somebody. When you're in that environment and you're in the team bubble, you should be free of having to be superstar Josh Allen.
They try to keep that bubble, in a way. Even when you go into the hotel, it's all roped off. You go through one entrance. There's keys right at the elevators that are in alphabetical order that Bill staffer went 3 days earlier to arrange with the hotel staff. So, but these are extraordinary changes that the Bills are going through. A couple that happened when I was there, and they were back-to-back years. It was either 07 and 08 or 08 or 09. We were in Cleveland, and like now, we were told the weather was going to be really bad in Cleveland. Rain turning to snow, and we kept hoping that it would stay rain before it turned snow. But pregame, I remember we were out there without jackets and everything. It was 50 degrees, and it turned during the game like it said it would. And the second half was just a blizzard, and we couldn't go home because of the weather in Cleveland. So Jim Overdorf, who was in charge of the hotel, had to ask the hotel if we could, instead of leaving, go back there again for another night.
Was it because you played so poorly and lost, and the city didn't want you back?
No. I sure we were. That's the thing about those years. We were still in a hunt. I think we were like
that wasn't the 8-0 special, right? The game that you guys lost like 8-0.
That was the 8-0 game.
You sure it wasn't because?
No, well, we were 7-6 going into it. Still alive.
When you lose 8-0.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah. And we were driving at the end, so that made us 7-7, and then you're still in it, but you needed to win out and have another team
so
lose
you had
out.
To stay. So you left the stadium after a loss, and then had to go back to the hotel.
Yeah, and they kind of scared up. First of all, they had the rooms, which was good. We went back to the same rooms, but everyone had to wear the same clothes they had worn.
Sure.
They didn't bring two sets of clothes. They had enough that they could put a meal together, kind of a skeleton meal. It was enough food. It was like pastas and stuff. But then they had a breakfast the next morning. And I remember we were taking the buses to the airport the next morning. At night, I was one of the people that had to take a piece of paper like this with a memo and put it under every player and coach's door, everyone that traveled. And it had the schedule for the next day, when to meet, when the buses were leaving. And the bus got stuck in the mud. So the buses just ended up driving us back from Cleveland to Buffalo. And I get back, and Winston Walker was an offensive lineman. He was one of those guys that had a real understanding of the CBA, like you want to be a player rep. He said to me a couple days later, he's like, I might have shared this story with you before. I don't know.
No, you shared it with me.
But not with you. Okay. And a couple days later, he was like, hey, Purdy, when are we going to get our per diem for the and he called me, Don, per diem. I just kind of stepped into that one.
Clever.
Right? Yeah, right.
And now, mind you, the per diem was like what, $30?
It's probably $45.
Okay,
but it's the principle of it, right?
Well, and remind me how the contract did Langston Walker sign?
It was $3 million a year, something like that. Yeah, and no, he wanted to get that for his teammates, and I said, well, we provided a breakfast for you. And he's, yeah, but it didn't have an omelet bar like it usually does. Like, okay. He goes, I'm going to call Troy Vincent, who was the player union, the head of the players union. I said, you know what? You do that and let him know that you talked to me, because what he didn't know is Troy played with us like a couple of years before that. And I knew Troy, he grilled me on the CBA all the time, which I hated. I tried to avoid him in the Pateria and stuff, but it made me better at it. It sharpened me up at it. So in a case like that, I was prepared.
Does every team have a U?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Have you met all? Did you collaborate with? Did you speak with all of the other, director of football admins, or was it more adversarial between you guys?
There was a meeting in Dallas every year, right around now, actually, for 2 days, where everyone in my position and vice presidents and salary cap people would go spend a couple days. And I was actually a day and night. We flew home. It was always on a Monday, coming back on a Wednesday. And we would talk. We'd get together for, a drink at night and share some stories. But you always had to be cognizant that you didn't want to give away trade secrets too. You had to
sounds like an accountant's convention. It sounds
no,
like a real banging good time.
Well, the highlight was at the end, they would read what the new salary cap was.
Oh, that's the highlight, huh?
And they milked it. Yeah, the new salary cap amount will be, and you watched all the managers sit up in their chairs and get ready to write it down as if they wouldn't see it again.
Sure. I mean, it's a big deal, but just the idea that that's the big reveal.
Yeah, it went up $8 million. There was a guy, and I forget his name, but he always knew that like the salary managers were dying to hear it, so he would have a couple jokes thrown in there just to watch everyone squirm. It was entertaining.
Yeah, so if there's 31 other of you and then like the person above you and whatever, I could see how you'd be a little leery of saying anything. Who knows what you could drop as a piece of information, because the NFL is so secretive and so competitive.
Well, you kind of always hear wise man learns from others' mistakes, and I just remember being around others in my position, and I would be shocked at the things that they would reveal, kind of trade secrets. And I remember coming back, talking to Jim or some others, whether it was the president, GM, John Guy, Tom Donahoe, those guys say, hey, in Denver, they said they do this. In Houston, they said they do this. And we were like, not a bad idea. And like they just voluntarily gave that information. And like,
did you ever hear about somebody who was like complaining about their team or angling for? Anybody ever angle for like outright angle for like another job? I mean, to name names or anything, but just like, was it one of those, like, was it a networking convention as much as it was a informational convention?
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone was aware of the fact that it's a transient league and there's a lot of turnover. And so most people viewed it as audition. I think at a baseline, we're happy where they were for the most part, but with the understanding that, if their team tanks and they wipe out the whole front office, that they're going to be looking for jobs and they want to have connections.
All right, here's one I've never asked you before. Give me like the top 5 franchises in terms of like reputation around the league, not on the field, but basically what you did, what I did. Like, what were the like the gold standard organizations?
The gold standard for efficiency would have been the Steelers. They somehow stayed competitive. They somehow knew when it was time to part ways with a team that, or a player that was still real popular, still really productive, but that his best years might have been behind him. And when you don't pay for the past, you pay for the future. And the contracts that their aides were likely asked for, it would be better to try to draft or try to replace that person with a free agent who's were ahead. And they did it with a really small staff. Like, I went to one conference at the offices in New York City, and they were teaching us how to do a new wave electronic contract. So they sent one person from each organization. I was the person for that year. And
you won the lottery there.
Yeah, well, so it was pretty complicated. But I remember there was a seat next to me, and it was a guy from the Steelers, and he got a phone call right before the presentation. We never saw him again. like he missed the whole presentation, and we were like, what's up, guy? And they said, well, that was their IT guy too.
Oh, wow.
And he got an IT issue that was such that he missed the whole thing. So, but yet they still, to your point, were competitive every year.
Shout out to Dan Evans, who does follow our podcast.
Dan Evans. Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm sitting on a good half a dozen stories of ways that he pranked me. Right now he would be traveling with the team. They're classic. They're fairly embarrassing for me and some others, but I'm willing to share for the sake of the program.
So two more good organizations.
You always admired the New York Giants.
Okay.
They're just real solid. I'm inclined to say the Cowboys here. New England's an enigma because first of all, there's very unfriendly to a point of being absurd. You talk about just talking to them, except for one guy, Richard, or salary cap guy. Richard was a nice guy. But I'll say the Cowboys. It was funny with them because we went to a travel meeting and we were talking about hotels to stay in. Which ones do you recommend? Which ones do you not? Which ones experience, bad experience, whatever. And I remember they said that they were going to not return to a certain hotel because the price of bottled water was too high.
Oh, wow.
You're the Dallas Cowboys.
This is Jerry Jones. Okay, yeah. That's an interesting.
Sorry, you're out. Yeah,
that's an interesting. Go back to the Steelers real quick. They've had 3 head coaches since I was alive.
Wow, right.
Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. 3
says a lot about stability.
And I remind people, how many head coaches were there when you were the director of football admin? 7,
something like that.
With Perry Fuel, I think it's 7. And we're only about 10 minutes away from spinning the wheel of
we're doing
coaches.
That
of course we are. And I actually the wheel.
Live, I didn't know
the wheel has already come up with a candidate. I think this will be an interesting one, but not necessarily a controversial one. All right. So on the other end of that spectrum, other than the Cincinnati Bengals, give me 2 teams that were at the bottom of your director of football admin power ranking.
Why say the Bengals? I'm not going to disagree with you, but why did you say
that's just the reputation around the league. If you ever watched Hard Knocks season with them, their scouting staff is always known to be like 60% less than everybody else in the league. So I'm assuming the Bengals would be one of them, but maybe there was 1 or 2 that you were like, oh man, I wouldn't work for them.
Right. I wouldn't work for them. See, when I'm going through like eras and different, a lot of different teams have good eras, bad eras.
Right.
So it's hard to box them.
I mean, this kind of always goes to ownership though, right? Like at the end, and sometimes there's ownership turnover, but it seems like a lot of times the same teams are known for the same faults. Yeah. And frankly, the Bills were known for faults for quite a while.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I would have said the Saints, but now I know their ownership. I know the people in the front office. Prior to the ownership that they have now, I would have said that. I couldn't get up to be with them. But now they have Kai Harley and some other folks, and they're a solid organization. I might also have said. Arizona.
I was actually going to say
Cardinals. They don't know who they are. St. Louis, and then they go Arizona, but then they're called Arizona, and they've had some good years, with Kurt Warner, and now, but I don't know. I don't see the stability there.
So Tim asked another question here, and this is
Tim's on fire.
This is a good one, and I'm curious for your reaction. Give me a good Ralph Wilson story.
Okay.
You know what? I have a Ralph Wilson story. And I got one too. Not the one you think of. Not the one you're thinking. So when I was in the merchandise department, the person who worked alongside of me, it was Halloween, and don't spit your drink out. It was Halloween, and we had a game. It was either the day before or actual Halloween. And he decided that he was going to come to work. We were in charge of stocking all of the merchandise stands throughout the game, this was
before you were coaching on the side.
Yeah. So this was my first couple of years. Don was at that point was the director of merchandise. Yeah. So the coworker decided he was going to bring a mask, one of those masks where I was throwing oatmeal chunks, and
so it looked like bees on his
chin. Correct. So he was one of the So he decided he was going to do that.
His eyes were popping out.
Yeah. It was a ridiculous Halloween.
It was grotesque.
And after the game was over, we lost, and we were going up the elevator from the locker room up to the 3rd floor of the administration building where your office was. The 2nd floor of the administration building at that time was like the front office and the coach staff and Mr. Butler and Mr. Wilson. And he put the mask on. He and I are in the elevator. The elevator doors are about to close, and this hand goes through the elevator door to get it open. And it was Jeff Littman, who was Mr. Wilson's CFO. Yeah, like his right-hand man.
He might as well have been Mr. Wilson extended.
Correct.
That was how we viewed it.
So, and they Mr. Wilson and those guys lived in Detroit. So they came in for games. They would come in. But when Mr. Wilson was there, he wasn't there every day. So it was kind of a big deal when he was there. So this hand was just through the elevator doors. The elevator doors propped back open, and Jeff Littman, and in walks Mr. Wilson. And I'm like, oh God. So it's me, Jeff Littman, Mr. Wilson, and a guy with a throw-up Halloween mask going up the elevator.
You have to see the mask.
It's ridiculous. So they get off at the 2nd floor, and I'm like, Jesus, man. I'm like, come on. And he got to taking the mask off. He's like, Mr. Wilson would have known it was me, and I would have looked ridiculous. And I point to his chest, and I'm like, hey, your credential with your giant name is right there, as is mine. Now, the director of our department at that time was Mr. Wilson's daughter, Christy. Yeah. So, of course, he knows who we are. And I could see him looking at the credential. And if you ever want to be taken seriously, I'm interning. I'm trying to get a foothold in here. I'm trying to get a job. I'm doing everything I can. And like one of my first interactions with the owner of the team is standing in an elevator after a loss with a guy with a throw-up mask who's like essentially my boss. Like, instant credibility hit. Like I was devastated. I got up to your office. I'm like, you're not going to believe this one. That's my Mr. Wilson story for you.
And nothing ever came of it, but that made it almost worse. Like they talk about it when they were away. Like,
we probably didn't matter enough for them to talk about it, which is not great.
At least it was a game. It wasn't like a Thursday or something.
Yeah, it wasn't a Thursday. So do you have a good one?
Yeah. I shared this one in a very, very early podcast, but our audiences were small podcasts.
This is great. This is great.
It was one year I was part of a team meeting of decision makers. I was, at the bottom of that. I was privileged to be included. About 20 of us. It was, team president. It was Tom Donahoe's era. Tom Modrak. John Guy. It was all the scouts, not coaches, but scouts. And it was basically going into the off season, and Marv was in the room and saying, okay, here's our roster. These are the contract that literally on the wall. Here's all the contracts. This is what they're going to cost us. This is what they are against the cap. Let's go through every player and discuss their value and value, taking into account what they were due to be paid versus their performance. So I didn't have a lot to say. I took a lot of notes, but the night was over. It was I want to say a cold early March night. It was pouring rain, and so they asked me to drive Mr. Wilson to an apartment that he had. Of course, his home was in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, a beautiful home, but he had an apartment when he came here in Williamsville. And they asked me to drive him there. It's a 20-minute drive. I'm like, of course. And I was a little nervous. I'm like, do I open the door for him? Would that be insulting?
Are you on a date?
Do I not open the door? Yeah. So, and the conversation was going to be a whole other, we'll see how that goes. So we're driving back, and he's like, there was one particular player that was talked about a lot, and in a way not so good. And he said, "Wow, this one player, I just don't know. What do you think about him?" I said, I had a curious conversation with him once where he came around to me to pick up one of his checks, and he said, "Hey, who do I talk to in this building to find out where I can get the best return on $100,000 investment?" And I
That was an odd question for a player of his stature, being the 4th pick in the draft from Texas, right?
Making millions. Is that just a random guess?
Shot in the dark.
Maybe. Wow, you're pretty good. And I told him that, and I said, it was curious to me because he was already making millions, and if he would just be able to play football for several years, the return on $100,000 investment is just
immaterial.
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous! Oh my gosh!" I put gas on the fire that I didn't realize until the next day. So I picked him up from the hotel. I brought him back to the room. Day 2 of the meetings. Day 2 of 2. And here we go. I think Tom Donahoe is going to start talking, or Tom Odrak. Mr. Wilson goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!
This is gives me
I'm
nightmares.
gonna start this meeting." Goes, "Don, I want you to share with the room the story that you told me in the car last night about said player."
That's a disaster.
And I looked around the room, and there were people looking at me like, "Are you kidding me? We're going with this." And I had no choice but to share the story verbatim.
Yeah, because you can call Mr. Wilson a liar.
No, if I say last thing I wanted, that's not what you said. I shared it to my best memory exactly. And,
how long did it take you to tell the story?
30 of the longest seconds of my life.
Were you contemplating getting your resume together while you were telling the story?
When it was all up, put it this way, we let the player go, and we parted ways. He did not play another down for the Buffalo Bills ever again. And like you said, he was a very draft pick. And I walked to an office on my way back to the office. Jim Overdorf was there, and a couple of the guys, and
he was your boss.
Yes, right. And he looked at me. He's like, I didn't know what to say. He's just like, "That's why you have to watch every word you say with our owner." And yeah. So
did you sleep? Did you sleep poorly that night?
Well, here's the thing. I knew Mr. Wilson wasn't going to hold it against me.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair. Yep. Yes, right. He obviously valued your opinion.
Yeah.
In the most odd, convoluted way. It was a compliment in some ways.
Yeah, he wanted, if you knew him, he wanted to be told the truth about everything, good or bad.
Yeah,
that's what he wanted.
And you did feel sometimes because he wasn't in the building every day.
Yeah,
things were probably kept from him or omitted, and being the straight shooter you were, right? Like, and maybe not even willfully, but you're not there every day. You're not at practice. You're not in the building.
Right.
There's something to be said for that. And he didn't live here.
No. And he asked me a direct question about him. And the thing that happened just a few months earlier, it stuck with me. And I
did you want to crawl in a, I would have just wanted to crawl in an absolute hole.
You could see the eyes looking at me when he said that. And I just, here we go.
Wow, and, that's a great story, but it speaks to the fact that when you're kind of he was not a detached owner, but when you're not there every day,
right,
there are things you don't know if people are telling you the truth or not. You're spending millions of dollars on individuals, like football players, but also individuals, and it's the idea of knowing them in a way that's off the football field that I think a lot of people don't realize or don't think about. And it's an odd question from a guy who should be focusing on making $50 million over the next 6 years. He should have been focused on the second contract, not on $100,000 and getting 8% rather than 11%.
Exactly.
Who cares?
$3,000.
It probably said a lot about where his priorities were and how long he wanted to play football.
Well, and Mr. Wilson had a story of his own with this player at training camp where one day practice had started at like 9 a.m. and this player, he saw him walking from a dorm around to somewhere else, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing practice?" And he was like, "I just don't feel so good today." And he was like, "Feels good? How much are paying you?" And so, man, we just threw gas on the fire. But and every GM I ever talked to, Mr. Wilson's era, said at some point, to me that Mr. Wilson called them at least once every day.
Yeah, sure.
And head coaches, maybe not every day, but a lot. But she's every day.
Amicus here. Before we get to the wheel of failed Bills coaches and wrap this up, he wrote MVP thoughts. Listen, if Allen ends the season on an 8-game winning streak with his total yards and TD stats, and while beating Mahomes and Burrow, I think what, Amicus? I think everything you said is correct. I think factually, unfortunately the media narrative this year is all about Mahomes. And I think because of, the weather games and this kind of weird, the Bills were the favorite this year, right? And when Tyreek Hill left for Miami, everybody kind of anointed the Bills. Vegas anointed the Bills as the favorite. The media did in the preseason. How many media guys picked them as the Super Bowl champs? And then it feels like all they're going to do from the point on is find flaws and tear down the favorite. And the Bills went through that, lull and that rough stretch. So it feels like you're looking for other narratives if you're in the media, because talking about how great Josh Allen is for 18 weeks gets a little dull.
Yeah. One interesting thing is on the last program we had talked about how many, the 1990 Bills had 10 Pro Bowlers. We talked about, I just saw this morning, four.
Matt Milano didn't make it.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
So he's, maybe this helps Josh Allen, the fact that, hey, a team that went this far only for Pro Bowlers. But no, they take that vote after the last regular season game.
Yeah, it's not a playoff award.
Yeah, unlike the Pro Bowl, they did it. That's 3 games left.
What's your best guess as to what his incentive is? Is there a MVP like voting incentive, not just to win, but if you're like top 5 MVP?
I mean, it's all up to the agent and the team.
Were there when you were there?
Oh yeah, there were clauses that said if a player makes the Pro Bowl, he gets X. If he, for a lot of the players, if they make the playoffs, if they win the Super Bowl.
Well, luckily we never had to cross the bridge.
It's happening a lot now. But for certain contracts, and a franchise quarterback would have a contract in there if he's league MVP. If he's voted.
Or even like second or third. I don't think that
I don't know about the second or third.
Okay, in the NBA,
I don't remember seeing a second in all the contracts I saw, which I had to do electronically. I don't recall seeing if they finished this in the voting. I saw straight, if he's league MVP.
Sure. I feel like he's not. I think even if they win the last 3 games, they win out. They have the number 1 seed, like Amos said. I think he's factually correct, but I think the media narrative has like flipped it around where Mahomes without Hill.
Yeah.
Fields
is in that conversation, isn't he?
Burrow, not Fields.
I'm sorry.
Hurts. Jalen Hurts.
But Jalen Hurts feels on my brain.
Jalen Hurts got hurt.
Eagles. Yeah.
He's gonna miss a game or 2. I feel like he's more of a product of the system rather than So again, I would, me personally, if the Bills win out, I think he absolutely should be the MVP. But I don't think he's gonna win it. I think the media narrative is flipped to Mahomes, and I think it's really hard to kind of turn that around because frankly, I don't think Kansas City's gonna lose another game either.
What if they do?
No, I would guess it's still going to be Mahomes. That's my guess.
The Mahomes minus Hill, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, not what I would vote. I feel like that's kind of the media narrative.
To think that Tua was in the conversation just up to a few weeks ago.
Well, that was fool's gold. Like you could tell right away.
Yeah.
So all right, we're gonna pivot here to the wheel of failed Bills coaches.
Live.
We're going to again state why we do this. Don was director of football administration for 13 years, and they made the playoffs exactly 0 times. So decided that we would, because Don had such interaction with coaching staff and every coach when it came to moving, expenses, travel, all that. So we try to find a kind of a random coach here and there.
That's what was random. If it wasn't for that car accident he was in,
thank God for that car accident.
Wow. I would have just been left saying he was real old.
Wow, well, thank goodness for a car accident. Right? Yeah. Luckily, he was okay.
Yes.
So today, the wheel of failed Bills coaches, it's going to fall on Dennis Thurman.
Dennis Thurman. He came in as defensive coordinator under Rex, and was cool.
Okay.
He was a cool
former player.
Coach. Former player. He was a starting safety for the late 1970s Cowboys that went, against the 49ers every year. I think he had a couple Super Bowl rings. Really sharp dresser.
Okay.
He brought him some Texas with him. Like occasionally, not in the office during the day, but like outside the office, he'd wear a cowboy hat and cowboy boots. Like he wanted people to know he was from Texas, but like a real sharp dresser, real nice guy. I felt bad for him because Robin, we've talked about this before. His voice was diminished and things got just a little sloppy. and it probably didn't help his reputation. But his first year with the team, he had a top 5 defense.
He came in
top
as
3, maybe it was.
He came in as the DC.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was Rex's guy.
Yep.
From with the Jets.
Yeah, I think he was on the Jets staff. I believe. We got a ton of guys from the Jets staff that year. It felt like we got at least half of Rex's Jets staff came over, and I believe Dennis Thurman was one of them.
It's funny that you say he brought the Texas. Like
Yeah.
when I was there was a couple of, obviously Wade.
Hey, I connected with Wade on LinkedIn yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wade and his dad was like, the honorary governor of Texas, Bum Phillips. So right. Wade is, known as Texas through and through, and a couple of the guys on the staff from Texas. And I remember it required reading for me that I wrote Friday Night Lights. Wade wanted me to read Friday Night Lights.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. When I got promoted, he hands me the book. He's like, all right, I'll read this, kid.
It was a great series, great story. But what were you supposed to get from it?
Texas.
That was applicable.
Oh, Texas.
Okay. No architecture.
Texas. I needed to know about Texas.
Got it.
I needed to know, he would wear cowboy boots. Yeah. When I went to his house a couple times, he had a great collection of cowboy boots, belt buckles, and obviously the ones his dad was well known for, the big 10, 5-gallon hat, whatever, the 10-gallon hat, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the belt buckle. And I met Bum Phillips in Kansas City, and my dad was so excited that I got to meet Bum Phillips. And I guess that's when I realized what a big deal Bum Phillips was to anybody probably just a little bit older than me.
If not for maybe the greatest team of all time, the 70s Steelers, who won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. By the way, it was crushing news to hear about Franco Harris.
And crazy that it was 2 days before the 5th anniversary. And did you hear they were going to retire his number?
They were going to retire his number. That was going to be just euphoria for him.
What took so long to retire his number?
I don't know.
I mean, he's been retired quite a long time.
I have a couple of friends of mine, because I was a big Steeler fan growing up, that thought, he was very good, but he'd run out of bounds sometimes, and he wasn't necessarily spectacular.
Okay,
I don't know.
I'm
saying I agree. I thought he's a Hall of Famer, but anyway, back to Bum. I mean, his 2 Houston Oilers teams, if not for the Steelers, he probably would have had 2 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, Love You Blue, right?
Yeah, Earl Campbell.
That was their
very other good. Their center was Karl Mock.
That's right. Yeah. There you go. That's one of the guys I was thinking of that he brought in from Texas. It's really interesting to watch a coaching staff kind of come together, because you really have, obviously with the team as well, but the coaches are together, dare say, much more so than the players.
Yeah.
On an NFL team, and you have a lot of different personalities, and it goes from a varied portion of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the Southern guys, you got the guys from the West Coast, kind of the laid back, all that. So before we go, I did see a video kind of tying in on this yesterday. Dan Patrick show, the old ESPN anchor. He was interviewing Marcellus Wiley. Okay. And believe it or not,
where did he go to college?
He Ivy League, Columbia. And he started talking. Dan Patrick asked him, Rob Johnson and Doug Flutie. And I'm like, so it's a minute and a half. It's a minute and a half, and I'm scrolling down Twitter, and I see Marcellus Wiley on the show discusses Rob Johnson and Doug Flutie, and I looked at the time, and it was like 1:52, and I'm like, do I really want to do this to myself? I really want to click on this and go back to 1999 and 2000, and I did. And Marcellus is really well spoken, great guy. I always had good positive interactions with Marcellus. And he, word for word, talked about how the locker room, was behind Doug, and the defense was behind Doug, and the offense was kind of split 50-50 between Rob and Doug, and the owner and the head coach were not on the same page with the quarterbacks. And it brought me back to the locker room and the altercations. And it was amazing how a 90-second clip from a former player can just jog all these memories and all these controversies about something that today, could you imagine that controversy, social media now?
Well, here's the thing too about those teams. You still had, granted in their twilight, but you still had Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed on that team.
You had the number 1 defense in the NFL in 1999.
Oh yeah, Ted Washington.
Yep.
They were a legitimate Super Bowl contender those years with those superstars in their twilight. So it really mattered. I was watching Houston the other day, and they used 2 quarterbacks. They said it so nonchalantly. I don't know that there's been such a fierce, hotly debated quarterback controversy since then, like to that degree. I can't think of one.
Well, we had a lot of controversies here in the last 15 years.
But no quarterback controversy.
No, there were, but it was like Jeff Toole against.
No. Yeah, but those teams weren't
right.
Like I described before.
Totally.
They weren't going
I was
anywhere.
just messing with you. No, that was, and you know what that was? That was more so than even the quarterback controversy. It was like a personality controversy, and it was how you looked at football, because Rob Johnson had every measurable. He was the prototypical California 6'4". He could run, he could throw. Yeah. He like, you met him and he was like made to be an NFL quarterback
in a movie.
Yes, yeah. he was central casting of an NFL quarterback. And then you had Doug Flutie, who was not out of central casting, not look like an NFL quarterback, was shorter than me. And but the way you viewed football, was it results? Was it potential? Was it, the outgoing charismatic guy? Or was it the guy that everybody liked, but you weren't sure whether he would be able to lead an NFL team, with like the will of his personality and how they played? Doug was like playground football before playground football was really allowed, or he was like Kyler Murray almost, where he was better off script than he ever was on script.
Oh man! Whereas
Rob Johnson would West Coast offense, quick reads, whatever else. So it just was really interesting to me to watch Marcellus talk about that, and how 20 years later that still like resonates.
Well,
with people.
It goes back to the question that it's still relevant.
Yeah, Dan Patrick asked the question.
Yeah,
so it's like, this is a national show, and they're asking a question about Buffalo Bills teams that never won a playoff game. The 98 team lost in Miami on the last play. Yeah. And then, of course, the Music City Miracle. And then 2000, we got bounced at 8-8. And then
98, 99. You're right. Those are first round losses.
They never won a playoff game.
Yeah. It was 11-5. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, twice.
Okay.
Wade ended up in 29-19 in 3 years and got fired. That's tough. That's tough.
That is tough.
That's tough. 29-19.
Yeah.
You have anything else for us before we go?
No, just this Bears game. I hate the word trap game, but if applicable to Kansas City and Philadelphia last week, I don't like. Chris kind of made a good point. He thinks that Sean McDermott's going to remind the team of what those two teams went through last week and not get caught off guard. Weather is going to be horrendous.
Yeah, but, and hopefully maybe the instead of looking at it as a negative, maybe the leaving early and just the travel disruption might actually serve to sharpen their focus.
It could.
And buckle down. You got nothing to do tonight. They're going to be sitting in a hotel in Chicago. It's going to be cold. Nobody's going out. You got nothing to do tonight. You focus all tomorrow. Hopefully they don't get antsy. Hopefully there's maybe something to do tomorrow.
They will, but
luckily it's not luckily it's not a night game Sunday. That would be a long 2 days.
Oh yeah.
Or Saturday.
Yeah.
It's a 1:00 game, because if it was a primetime game, that would be a long time to hang out in a hotel room.
From the every little bit helps department, it's like at noon.
Right, it's Central time.
Yeah.
All right, even better.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see everybody next week, and happy holidays and go Bills.
Merry Christmas. Good to see everybody.